Yeah, so today it will be a little bit different, slightly different from the previous session, which is we're going to talk about the actual exam practice today. Um, and how about let's get started? Yay. Okay, so before I started, the reason that I want to start it from set two is because I like even number. And all of the question, which is FRQ, the free response question we're going to talk about today, is based on the newest updates from College Board. And I post out a lot of answer for you guys just for an example, but because I'm not a really authority person, even though I teach AP Psychology and I'm a psychology student. But please, please, please go check the College Board answer after this session if you have any question about the answer. I mean, about the answer. Yes. Okay. How about let's get started? Okay, I will not present the slides right now because we're going to switch from the Canva to the PDF. So it's a little bit ugly right now, but let's just get started like this. Okay, before we talk more about the free response itself, let's how about let's talk about what you need to do or what you will do during the FRQ. So the most important section or the long like the section that it takes the longest time is this part. It is the using the source provided and response to all parts of the questions. And you need to respond the sixth question, which is the part A to F. And you need to write the response to each part of the question in complete sentences with appropriate psychological terminal in your response. And we are going to talk about each question later. Okay. Okay, how about let's start from the introduction. This is the AP Psychology Set to Free Response question, and you can find it down there. Okay, this is the part we're talking right now. Okay, I cannot highlight it. Anyway, okay, let me just read through not every single thing, but the most of the most important things in this PDF. So you'll have a brief information about what we are going to talk about when we're answering the question. Okay, let's start from the introduction. Introduction is a really important part of the FRQ. Maybe like some of you think like, okay, it is just like a brief, like a little summary of what's the study about, like why it is important to read the introduction. The answer of it is because most or like maybe 60% of the FAQ question, the answer of it will be in the introduction. So it is pretty important. So let's just get started and start read it. So for the study we're going to talk about, it's dogs often comfort their owners by making visual and or physical contact when the owners cry or providing help to their owners when they are sick. The study examined whether a dog's reaction to a person's emotion differ based on the dog's prior experience with the person, which is the owner versus a stranger. Participants, we're going to skip the most part about it because they just talk about like the different breed of the dogs. The important information in this section are researchers recruit community member with non-aggressive dog via email. Of those recruit, 16 dogs and owners peer participated in this studies, and we're going to skip all of it. Okay. For the method is a long part, like long paragraph of it, but it is also really important for you to read. Okay, so for this study, each dog's owner received and signed a consent form. Researchers test each dog at their owner's house, and the dogs received dog biscuits as compensation for participation in the study. All dogs and owner pairs participated in all 4 trials of the study. This is called a within-subject design, which means that researchers observe each participant in every condition of the study so that a participant can be directly compared to themselves across the conditions. The within-subject design serves the same purpose as random assignment. Okay, let me see. And there are actually some other parts of the method, and let's just skip the first paragraph because that is not that important for today. Let's just start from here. So the stranger researcher asked the owner to follow the same set of instructions during each trial. When you are asked to cry, please pretend to cry to the best of your ability for 20 seconds. The researcher will tell you when to begin and when to stop. When you're asked to laugh, please pretend to laugh to the best of your ability for 20 seconds. When you're acting, please use approximately the same volume. Also, please do not refer to your dog by name. Look directly at them. And I'm going to skip this part. Okay, this part is not really important. Okay. And let's skip to the result and discussion part. Researchers focus on 2 different kinds of dog behaviors. Person-oriented dog behavior include looking at a person, making contact with a person, approaching a person, or vocalizing at a person. Non-person-oriented dog behavior include passive behavior, walking, solitary play, and general vocalizing. And the total number of person-oriented behavior from the dogs for each trail behavior the owners and researchers strangers act out is presented in the table. We are going to talk about the table later. Let's just skip all of this and go back to the Canva. Okay, so let's get started on the first question, which is A. Identify the research method used in the study. I don't know if anybody already recognized it when I read it. And look at the part I highlighted. All dogs and owners pair participated in all 4 trials of the study. This is called the within-subject design. When you're asked to cry, please pretend to cry. When you're asked to laugh, please pretend to laugh. And each dog participated in 4 separated 20-second long trials in which one the owner cried, second the stranger researcher cried, the third the owner laughed, and the fourth stranger researcher laughed. Okay, I read it again, and did anybody of you recognize something? Or hence, did you still remember what is the IV, the independent variable, and the dependent variable means? Let's go into the answer part. So we need in order to identify the research method, we need to know what are the method they use, right? So researcher actively manipulated the independent variables, which is the owner or strangers, with crying and smelling, and control irrelevant variables, which is fixed 20-second standardized instruction, and measure the dependence variable, and those are the numbers of dogs' behavior. So all of this, if the research method includes a independent variable, a dependent variable, and something that will never change, which is the irrelevant variables, then this is probably the experimental method. And the research, the study itself, which is the question itself, they mentioned the within subject design, which is the same groups of dogs, sample size of 16, participated in all 4 conditions, eliminated individual difference through self-control. So in order to get a 5 in the FRQ for that specific question, you need to say, this is an experiment, which is the research method. This is an experiment using a within subject design. because researchers manipulate the environmental conditioner, independent variable, and measure dog behavior. They deepen the variable with each dog's participating in all 4 trials to control for individual differences. So the score point for this is it is essential, or it is really important to mention manipulate independent variable and within subjects, which is the answer already in the text. Okay, answer only experiment is incomplete. So if you only answer like this is a experiment method or experiment study, then you might get like a 3 or a 2 for the FRQ. Okay, let's go into the second one. Let me see if this one will be helpful. Haha, right here. Okay, no, okay, right here. Anyway, let's ignore that. Okay, so the question B, state the operational definition of person-oriented dog behavior. Okay, this is the part that I already read, the results and discussion, and they already wrote it in it. So basically, the operational definition for this specific study is looking at the person, making contact with a person, approaching a person, and vocalizing at the person. And this is already stated in the task. So yeah, it's already defined in there. So in order to get AP score 5 answer, you need to state it out. So person-oriented behaviors were operationally defined as visual observing a person, physically touching them, moving toward them, or vocalizing directly at them. Example is barking toward the person. So you can you cannot really like copy paste every single thing stated in the task. I mean, you could, but there is there's possibility that you might get a 4 from that FRQ. So a better way is you state it out in your own words, but the same meanings of that. So the key point for scoring is you must include at least 2 specific behavior already stated in the text. Okay. Let's go to question C. Question C is describe what the means of the person-oriented behavior indicated for the laughing trails as compared to the talking trail. Okay. So let me see. We are going to look at these two charts from the question. Okay. And let me see. We're going to compare each data. So we're going to compare the owner crying, which is 42 times. It is a high mean, and the owner's laughing, which is 15 times low means. And the deeper meaning for that is the dog react more strongly to crying, but less strongly to laughter. Okay. So the AP score 5 answer for this question is the mean person-oriented behavior was significantly higher in crying trails, which is 42 for owner crying and 46 for starter crying. Then laughing trails, 15 for owner laughing and 20 for stranger crying, indicating dogs exhibit more comforting behavior toward distress vocalizations. However, they responded similarity to crying regardless of whether the person has their owner or stranger. The scoring point right here is you must cite the specific data in there, which is the 42 versus 15 or the 36 versus 20. And you also must explain that dogs can distinguish emotion but not people. because you can compare different data. 42 and 46 doesn't have a big difference over there. Okay, before we go to question D, you might question like, the question said that you need to compare for the laughing trail as compared to the talking trails. Why you compare to the, why you're comparing between the crying and the laughing? The reason for that is, in the PDF, which is in the question set, they didn't mention what is the talking trails for that. They don't even have a data set for it, but they do have a clear data set for crying. Like you can see right here, they have the owner crying, they have the stranger crying. So in this case, the only thing you can compare is between crying and laughing. So that's why our answer is focusing on the 42 people crying and 15 people for laughing. Okay, we're almost there. We're almost there. It's the fourth question already. Okay. So for question D, identify at least one ethical guideline applied by the researcher. This part, to be honest, for me, I think it's the most easiest part in the whole FRQ. Maybe the whole FRQ you can do. Because ethical guidelines is usually rather stay in the first sentence of the method or the start of the second paragraph. So for the dog study, they mentioned that each dog owner received and signed. This is really important. They actually signed a consent form. So what does the sign a consent form means? Sign a consent form means that the participants, they agree with what the researchers will do to them. Okay? And researchers test each dog at their owner's house. So they gave the dogs a safety environment. So the dogs will chill out. They won't like be super scared, or the dogs won't get like panic because they're in a strange environment. And at the last, the dogs receive a dog biscuit, which is a dog treat, as compensation for participation in the study. So you can choose any of these three to answer the question D for the ethical guidelines applied by the researcher. Okay. Right. The core principle for that is the human ethic is the informed consent. They design it. The animal ethic is the minimization of suffering. They stay in the environment they're familiar with, and they get the snack. They get the dog treats. So a score 5 answer for this specific question will be researcher adhered to ethic by obtaining informed consent form from owner and providing a low stress environment, which is quotes testing at home with compensation, biscuits or dog treats to promote animal welfare. The key points for getting a higher score is the term informed consent and animal welfare must be clearly defined. If you say these 2 points in this specific answer, then you're good. Even though they mention that they only need at least one, but you can bring as much as you can. Now, question E. Explain the extent to which the research findings may or may not be generalizable using specific and relevant evidence from the study. So what is this question about? This question is basically asking is this study can cover all of the population they're studying. So let's go back and review the participants, right? They said that their sample size are only 16 dogs, and even though they said that they have different breeds of the dogs, but they didn't really specificate which, like what jobs are those dogs doing? Are they like service animal, emotional support animal, or just like the daily pets animals we usually have? And then in the second paragraph, they said they ask when you're asked to cry, please pretend to cry. So basically, it's like people are trying to act like they're crying or act like they're laughing. So sometimes it's a little bit too fake. So the limitation for this, the first one is what I mentioned. They have a really small sample size for it and limited variety, which is lack of working dog, guard dogs, service animal, right? And artificial setting, pretending to cry, laugh may be unnatural. So the score 5 answer for this specific question is finding may lack gen generalizability due to small sample size, which is 16 dogs, limited breed diversity. For example, no German Shepherds. To be honest, you don't really need to mention German Shepherd right here. This is just my habits. And artificial stimuli, which is stimulated crying. However, the within subject design enhance internal validity. The key points for this one is the sample issue and ecological validity must be pointed out when you answer it. Okay? Just want to be clear when you writing writing like a short sentence when you're answering, please don't just say they have a small sample size or uh like artificial stimuli. Please say that if they actually pointed out that they have a small sample size, which is 16 dogs participated, please say they have 16 dogs right here, just to make it looks more clear. Okay, let's go to the last one. Explain how at least one of the research findings supports or refutes the ideas that dogs' expressions of the person's oriented behavior demonstrate stimulus discrimination in operant conditioning. And these two are the old chart, so I'm not going to talk more about this. So let's dive into it. The core principle for this one is stimulus discrimination. So the stimulus discrimination for this one is the dog can distinguish between different stimuli. For example, crying versus laughing and responds differently, which is high frequency versus low frequency behavior. The counterexample for this one is the dog cannot distinguish between their owners and stranger. So their responses to crying are similar for both. Like remember what I said, like for the owner it's 42, for the stranger it's 46. So how can we answer it? The better way to answer this part is just say that the dogs demonstrate stimulus discrimination for emotion by responding more to crying than laughing, apprended conditioning. However, they show no discrimination for person identity, which is similar response to the owner and stranger's crying, suggesting emotional cues override uh, familiarity. Key point for evolution for this one is it is necessary to argue both in favor, which is the emotional distinction, and against, which is the no distinction of identity. Because the question itself it was asking about is there any difference between the owner and the stranger, right? And the research actually state that they don't have that much of the difference. Instead of that, the dog are having like more different response between the emotion, which is the crying and laughing. Great. And we're done for the first part of the answer. How's everybody feeling? I know there's a lot because let's just go back to the PDF. Because when you get the work, when you get the exam sheet, right? a huge pack of it, and you see like, oh my gosh, like all of this, a really, really long paragraph. What should I do to it? So just like what we went through it, first read the introduction, has a brief idea of what is the study about, then focus more about the method itself. So the participant is important, but the sample size of it's more important than like the other data itself. Okay. And you don't really need to worry about the result and discussion. You can choose to read it even after you start answering the question. Okay. So don't get panicked when you get the exam. I mean, there is a lot of words, but chill out and you're doing good. It's okay. We still have set 1 to practice. So let's get into the second part of the FRQ for set 2 right now. Set 2 is a little bit harder and more complicated and have more reading than the part 1, but it's okay. We have a good not hint, but it's a good tips. Yeah, we have a good tips to help you to get through it. Let's start to read what you need to do for the section 2. So the question has 3 parts, part A, part B, and part C, using 3 sources provided to answer each part of the question. Okay. Oh, by the way, and you need to cite the sources that you used to answer the question. I didn't cite it. I didn't cite it properly right here, but please cite it when you're in the actual exam. Okay. And you need to, using the source provided, develop and justify an argument about specific social condition that leads people to be more likely to help another person in an emergency. Question A. Propose a specific and defensible claim based on psychological science that responds to the question. B. Support your claim using at least one piece of specific and relevant evidence from one of the sources. And B has 2 parts. Explain how the evidence from part B, which is the first part of part B, supporting your claim using a psychological perspective, theory, concept, or research finding learned in AP Psychology. C, the part 1 for C, supporting your claims using an additional piece of specific and relevant evidence from a different source than the one that was used in part BI. Which means that there are 3 sources in total, right? If you use source 1 in part B, you cannot use it anymore. You can only choose from the source 2 or source 3. So second, explain how the evidence from part C1 supports your claim using a different psychological perspective, theory, concept, or research finding learned in AP Psychology than the one that was used in part B. Part C, they gave you so the second part of the question B and C, they gave you more freedom. So you don't really need to find like a specific theory or a concept for it. Instead of that, you can use any research finding or different psychological perspective as well to answer it. Okay. And because each source is really similar to the part 1 for the FRQ, which means that they have introduction, participation, methods, and the result and discussion. So in this session, we're going to skip all of that to the end for the result and discussion. And I know you joined this session and you don't want me to read through all of it, right? Because it will be super boring and you might get a lot of information. So I made a 1-sentence summary for you for each source. And this summary is the only thing you need. Okay. So part A, proposes specific and defensible claims based in psychological science that responds to the question. When you start to read different sources, please take like a note to what each source is about, and try to make like a 1 to 2 sentence brief summary of what the source is talking about. So for example, in the set 2 practice, the source 1 for this part, basically it just, the larger the group, the less help there is, which is the diffusion of responsibility. The source 2 is about 90.9% of public conflict involved intervention, and the more people involved, the higher the intervention rate. Yeah, just like make a 1 to 2 sentence brief summary for the whole source like this. It'll be really, really helpful for you to make a claim. Okay? Source 3 is in dangerous situation, groups reduce assistance, but in non-dangerous situation, the opposite is true. Okay? And as while I'm reading all of this summary, you might think like, okay, it sounds a little bit weird. Like some of the summary or some of the states sounds pretty conflict, right? Or even opposite for it. So how am I supposed to make a better claim in this situation? Okay. So the example I gave is people are more likely to help in dangerous emergencies when fewer bystanders are present due to reduced diffusion of responsibility. That is source 1, 2. But in non-dangerous public conflict, larger groups may increase intervention through social facilitation or shared norms. The word but right here is really, really important so that you can make the conflict state or like the conflict summary into a good, oh wait, what is that? Into a good claim. Okay. The key points for this is the argument must include the contextual difference. For example, in the source mentioned, which is the dangerous situation versus the non-dangerous. Okay. Part A of this part is actually, I think the one takes the longer time. So please be careful of it. Don't forget to mention like buts or however, something like this when you are making a claim. Let's go to the part B. Part B, 1. Support your claim using at least one piece of specific and relevant evidence from one of the source. 2. Explain how the evidence from Part B1 support your claims using a psychological perspective, theory, concept, or research finding learned in AP Psychology. In this situation, in my situation, I choose source 1, which is the classic diffusion of responsibility experiment. That is what the source 1 is about, okay? And I also need to link to the theory of diffusion of responsibility because that's what source 1 is about. So my answer will be the first part. Source 1 report only 31% help in 6 persons group versus 85% when alone. And this is a site. The Darley and Latane 1968, this is the site. Okay? And the second part of the question B, this supports diffusion of responsibility, the psychology terms. Individuals feel less personal obligation to act in large groups, assuming others will help, which is the second part of it is just basically I'm explaining what is the diffusion of responsibility in that situation. Okay. The key point for getting a score 5 answer is the data must be accurate, right? The 31% via the versus 85%. And all of it is, you can find it in the text. Okay, just want to be clear. The part 1 of B is you need to use data to claim what is it about. The part B is you state the concept, theory, research finding that you want to talk about, and you need to explain it. Okay? Boom, boom. Let's go to C. Really similar to part B. Right? Support your claim using an additional piece of specific and relevant evidence from a different source than the one that was used in part B. In my case, I choose source 2 or 3. I choose source 2. And you also need to use a different theory to explain the contradictory conclusion. So the score 5 answer for this one is the first part. Source 2 found intervention occurred in 90.9% of public conflicts, with more bystanders increasing intervention odds, with a citation at the end. Right? So really similar to part B. Question B. The first part, you need to use data to support, right? The second part, you need to find the concept or theory or something like that. You need to explain it. The one I said is, this reflects social facilitation, which is the cognitive psychology term. Group presents heightened arousal and reinforce pro-social norms in low-risk public settings. Okay. So it's also really important to remember, like, basically almost every concept we learned in AP Psychology. Okay. And thank you so much. And that are the set 2 practice for 2025 updated AP Psychology. And we are going to the next one later after break. Okay? How about let's just have like a maybe 10-ish minutes. Actually, no, let's have a 12 minutes break. How about that? So it is 18 right now, and let's come back at 22. No, 32. Okay? Let's take a small break. Stop sharing. Okay. So let's get back to it, because we already have some brief experience for how to do the FRQ practice. So how about let's have a little speed run for the set 1. Okay? Set 1 of AP Psychology, the same thing, the same set. The different sets, but they're all from College Board, and it's the newest update. Okay. Let's get back to it. So this is let's go to set 1. Okay, set 1. Okay, this is set 1. Let's get to it. Look at the structure of it. It is really similar to set 2, right? They have the question from A to F, have the intro, participate, methods, right, result, and discussion with a chart. So these are the structure for the AP Psychology FRQ Part 1. It will be always like this. So if you're going to take psychology next year, or maybe like next year, if they didn't change the set of it, it will be like this structure all the time. They're just going to change some of the question in there. Okay. So because we already introduced like what we need to stay for, what we need to take care of it. So let's just skip this slide and get into the intro. Okay. So the introduction for this study is the research study explored the effect of being present with varying amounts of misinformation about the specific event on the memory of that event. Participants will be a total of 127 students at the large university, were recruited through the university's research participation system. Okay, and they participated in the study in exchange for college credit. This is not important. The final sample of participants was 69% of women and 31% of men. The race, ethnicity of the participants will report as the following. 65% of Hispanic or Latina, 15% of Black African American, 11% of White European American, 4% of Asian American, and 5% of others. Okay? And just a hint or like a tips of when you look through the participant, just focus on the number itself. Yeah. So if you see like it's 127 of student, okay, that is the sample set. 69%, 31%, they might not be really important right here, but you know, like where's the number located, right? So in the future, if other questions are asking you and you need to find the participants, then you know like where the numbers locate. Okay, let's start it. Identify the research method used in the study. So did I ever show it right here? No, let's go to the set. Okay. Okay, it's in the method section. Remember what I said at the first of this session? Methods might be the most important part of it, and you'll find all of the information you know. Let's go back. So the participants were randomly assigned, really important, to one of three conditions to receive a summary with a specific amount of misinformation. The first one, low misinformation condition, 8 of 40 sentences, 20% misleading information. Median misinformation condition, 50% misleading information. High misinformation condition, 80% of missing information. Right? You got the percentage, which is the numbers, and you got the randomly assigned. Maybe somebody already know what is the research method is, but you know that they didn't mention that what is the specific independent variable or the thing that they're controlling, the dependent variable, right? So this might not be an experimental method. So let's get to it. The researcher actively manipulate the amount of misinformation, right? 25, 50, 80%, those number, and the measures of the participant memory's accuracy rate. And this is therefore an experimental method, like conducting a scientific experiment. The variable were controlled and the results were absorbed. Sorry, that's my bad. It is an experimental. Okay, so the score 5 answer is an experimental method because researcher manipulates misinformation level, independent variable, and measure memory accuracy, dependent variable with random assignment. So why this is important, or like why this is a good answer? Is because they need to mention the experimental method, the method name itself, and the quoted the original text randomly assigned and conditions, which is the evidence of it. Sorry, it was my bad. I forgot what the question I did. Okay, earlier. Sorry. Okay, so let's go to question B. State the operational definition of high misinformation in the study. Did you guys remember the operational definition? Is it really familiar? Yes, this is exactly the same. I mean, similar, like 99% similar question in the set 2 we practiced. Yeah. So part B is usually always focused on the operational definition. Before we get into the text itself, let's just let's just be specific, like what is the operational definition is. So it is the specific standard listed by the researcher. Really easy, really easy. You just need to go into the text and find it, right? So the question is ask for high misinformation. So in the method section right here, high misinformation condition, 32 of 40 sentences, 80% misleading information. And this 80% of the sentences are incorrect. This is the operational definition. Really easy. So the score 5 answer is 80% of sentences contain misinformation, which is 32 out of 40 sentences. And why this is a good answer? So you need to directly copy the original number, like 80% or 32 out of 40, and do not add personal explanation. Which is the operational definition, is an objective standard. The author will like really obviously list it in the text. And maybe some of the lovely student may ask like, okay, this is a really short sentence. Like how can I make sure that I get a 5 based on this sentence rather than write like a super long paragraph? The thing the college board that they claimed before is they don't really need you to write as long as possible. They just need like a 1 to 2 sentences that can state out the information they want, and that's all. So if you want to save some times and you don't want to write too many to make you sound bad, or you accidentally add some wrong information in it, so just write like a really short 1 to 2 sentence, include every single thing in it, and you'll be fine. And you don't need to write that much. So yeah. Let's go into the next one. Part C. Describe what the mean indicates for the percentage of correct responses between the high misinformation group and the low misinformation group. Right? The problem already asked the high misinformation group and the low misinformation group. So you just need to compare them. Right? Correct response right here. High misinformation and low information. It's really easy. I love this set. Set 1 is obviously more easier than set 2. Okay. So let's make a conclusion based on the data. Conclusion: the more misleading information there is, the less accurate the memory becomes. So a score 5 answer for this part will be the mean correct responses were lower in high misinformation group, which is 63%. The data, it's important. You need to put the number, the data itself on there. Then low group, 74%. Showing more misinformation reduce memory accuracy. Why this is a good answer, right? The first thing, really important, compare specific data. I already said the word data for like too many times, but it is really important. Please put every single number in your answer, so they'll give you a higher score, and it is easy. You can find it in the chat, the text, like everywhere. Explain the causal relationship, misleading to poor memory. D. Identify at least one ethical guidelines applied by the researcher. Remember the dog study? They will be stated either at the first sentence or like this first sentence of the second paragraph in the method section. Right here. So this is a fundamental ethical principle in psychological research. Consent must be obtained before conducting any research. Right? They already stated after providing consent, which is means the people who is being studied, they signed a form said that they agree to the study. Right? Really easy. Okay, so the score 5 answer will be researchers follow ethic by obtaining informed consent before the study. Easy, right? Accurate. So you need to accurately use the term informed consent and the quotation of the original text consents. That is the evidence. Usually in most of the FRQ, especially for the question D, they might always state the word consent in the text itself. So you just need to copy paste it. Okay. Let's run through question E. I post a really long paragraph right here, but that is not important at all. So question E is explain the extent to which the research findings may or may not be oh my gosh, my brain died. Generalizable using specific and relevant evidence from the study. Remember what I said when I read the part of participants? Be careful and look at the numbers. Yay! Okay, so does anybody remember what I said when we practiced the dog question about part E? Anything? Okay, so part E usually is about can this study represent the whole population? Basically, it's like that. Yeah. So therefore, we can ask 3 questions. First, can it represent older people? No, absolutely no, because it's a large university, right? All of the students are from university, which is usually like younger adults. Can it represent other ethnic groups? Not really. They have a 65% of Hispanic or Latino, Latina. And they only have like a 4% of Asian American and 5 others. So maybe not to all of the other group. Can online experiment reflect reality? Probably not for this one. So the answer is limited general oh my gosh, I can't read this word. Generalizabilities. Sample was mostly young Hispanic student, right? Young, like college student, young Hispanic student doing online tasks, not real world scenarios. So why this is a good answer, right? So because they point out the 3 weaknesses, they have mostly the same age group, racial bias, like right, most 65% of Hispanic student, that's a lot, a low ecological validity. Okay, let's skip to question F because we're almost run out of time. Okay, we need some time for the 3 sources. Okay. And question F, explain how at least one of the research findings supports or refutes the misinformation effect. So, right, you need to compare the data set. They're asking for at least one of the research findings. So basically you can use any. The one I use is about the misled part. I compared this two data, the high misinformation with a 30% and low misinformation for 90%. And I got the conclusion that it's proof that misleading information distort memory. So the answer I got is supports misinformation effect. High misinformation group had more misled response with the data, 30%, than low group data, showing false suggestion distort memory, which is like you make like a small claim and you use the evidence to support it, right? Why this is a good answer? First of all, citation data. 2, clear support for the theory. That's all, right? It's pretty easy. You just make a claim and find the evidence. You can make any claim because they state that at least one, right? So you can do any. Okay. Now we are finished for the first part of the set 1 FRQ. And that's really fast, right? And because we have an experience of doing the set 2 practice, so this is not that hard compared to set 2, right? So that's a good thing. For the second part of the FRQ, it is exactly the same, just with a different question. For the FRQ set 2, right? You have 3 parts, part A, part B, part C. You need to answer all of this for by using the 3 sources. Okay, like like as you can see, the sources are really, really long. So it takes a lot of time to read it. So how about when you start at this part, don't start from the introduction. Like this is really different from the part A of the FRQ. When you meet the situation that you need to read 3 sources, just go to the really, really bottom, not the really bottom, like really bottom for that source, and read the results and discussion, and make a 1 to 2 sentence summary for that. Okay? So let's get to question A. Propose a specific and defensible claim based in psychological science that responds to the question. This is the part that we need to make summary and make a claim. Okay, and as usual, I made like a 1 to 2 sentence summary for you guys so you can understand what each source is about. First of all, source 1. It's about when others are present, simple tasks are completed faster, which is put on shoes, for example, while complex tasks are complete more slowly, for example, putting on lab coats. Source 2 is baboons react more slowly in groups, especially males. Source 3, perform better when alert to surveillance. Okay, so for question A, we need to combine all these three summary together, right? The key point for this is whether the presence of others is beneficial depends on the type of task, right? Because different source, they said that if they're like the tasks are more complex or more simple will be different. If they're like people around them, when they're doing the task, the response will be different too. So the answer I got for this answer is presence of others improves performance for simple tasks. For example, like wearing shoes, right? But using word, keyword, but or however, some word like that. Hinders complex tasks using source 1 and 2 unless evolution is involved. Let's go to question B. So question B, the first part, support your claim using at least one piece of specific and relevant evidence from one of the sources. Really, really really similar to the practice we do at set 2. So let me just dive into it. The score 5 answer, the first part is I use source 1. Participate faster at well-learned tasks. For example, putting on shoes with audience present. And I need to find like a theory or concept, right? So at part 2, I said this shows social facilitation, which is motivation increase for easier tasks. Really easy. And why this is a good answer? First of all, I quote well-learned task. This is our original term that is already stated in the question. And I also use the correct theory, which is the social facilitation in here. So that's why this is a good answer. Okay. And all of like, for example, like the terms well-learned text, something like that, you'll find it in the text. It will be in the methods also. Question C, support your claim using an additional piece of specific and relevant evidence from a different source than the one that was used in the part B. So, the score 5 answer for this one, the part 1 is I use source 2. You can use either source 2 or source 3, but I like source 2 because I love bamboo. Just in case if you don't know what this baboon is monkey, like this. This guy. Yeah, those are baboon. Okay. Yeah, source 2. Baboon had slower response time in conflicting trails when others were present. This is really similar to the summary I made at the first, right? So another tips for doing the summary thing is when you're doing summary, it could be really helpful for you to answer the further question also. Okay, the part 2 for this one is this reflects social inhibition, which is anxiety disrupts complex tasks, which is a theory, and why this is a good answer. First, they use different theories. Social inhibition is not equals to social facilitation, even though they sound pretty similar. So when you remember, like, especially when you're doing like a flashcard or something, please don't mix up different concepts. Okay, and also I cited the conflicting trails, which is complex task evidence. And you can also find it in the original text itself. Okay, and that will be at the end of the exam. Okay, so stop, end of the exam. And I didn't do the thank you slides for this one. I'm really, really sorry. I forgot to do it. But anyway, thank you so much for all of you guys come back and participate in this session today. It is a really complex and a hard and a bunch of information shooting to your brain session. But I hope today's session will be helpful for you if you're the type of person that you really don't want to do the practice, but you want to know what this FRQ is about. So I hope it will be helpful. And it's really one of my pleasure to studying a AP Psychology session with all of you guys. And thank you for everyone who participated in all of the 6 sections.